Hello there, my name is Jason Schmaltz and I'm an AMGA Rock Guide apprentice, and today we're going to continue our Jim to Crag series, this time focusing on cleaning anchors, one of the most important skills to have before you go outside and start climbing. And I'd recommend practicing what I show you in this video on the ground. You can use a skills board like I have. You can check out their website, skillsboard.com, promo code SSE10 to get yourself one of these, or you can just tie something to the tree and practice this. But it's important to practice this on the ground first. This is where a lot of the mistakes happen. This is where a lot of fatality reports come out, even in single pitch. So cleaning anchors, definitely something to be focused on. 3 principles I want you to think about in cleaning anchors. Number 1, think about minimizing equipment, both from the complexity of a system and then also from the perspective of accidentally leaving some of your equipment behind. You want to minimize the equipment, keep the system simple. That way there's less failure points, there's less drop points, there's less stuff that you'll forget once you get up to clean the anchor. Number 2, minimize communication. It doesn't mean don't communicate, but use a procedure that has the minimal amount of communication required between you and your partner. Might not be able to hear things, you can have miscommunications, and that can a lot of times result in catastrophic endings. And then lastly, thirdly, minimize the amount of times you have to transfer your weight from one system to another. I'm going to show you some modern ways to take down anchors that don't transfer your weight to any other systems than the one that you're already currently climbing on. But some of the older systems, and sometimes you have to use them, require you to shift from one system to another, but you want to minimize the amount of time you use these. Every time you transfer your weight from one system to another, you introduce risk. So the scenario we'll focus on for this video is in a top rope setting, cleaning a top rope anchor in single pitch environment. I've gotten to the top of the climb. I've come to a master point with 2 opposed locking carabiners that are locked, and now I need to get this off, and I have my belayer who's been taking up slack the whole time as I've been climbing. So the most simplest procedure, if I have a good stance, is to go ahead and stay on belay, go ahead and keep these carabiners intact, and just ask my belayer for a little bit of slack, just enough to take a bite and pass it through both rings and try to pass it behind your anchor system so that you can easily take your anchor system off before you leave the belay stance. Just pass enough of the rope through to have a bite that basically goes down to your belay loop, and go ahead and tie a figure 8 on a bite. Grab another locking carabiner, clip that to my belay loop, lock it down, and I can go ahead and ask my belayer to take. And now I've weighted the new knot that I just tied, and I can start to clean this old system because my old knot is no longer weighted. So I'll go ahead and untie my initial figure 8 because it's unweighted now. I can fully untie that. I can pull this strand through, and now my system's getting simpler. Now I can go ahead, clean my belay system. I'm still on the initial take that I asked my belayer to give me, and I'm ready to lower on these rings. So I can ask them to lower me, and I lower just like I'm in the gym. Now, a lot of old school climbers may criticize this method, but this is actually the method that's recommended by the American Alpine Club. This was done in the last 5 or 10 years, I think, because there were too many deaths happening for a procedure I'll show you later where you actually have to transfer your weight to another system. The American Alpine Club stance is that the wear through the rings is insignificant to the cost of a human life, which of course I agree with, and that modern anchor systems are set where they're, number 1, being stewarded, and number 2, easy to replace. So wear over the course of 10, 15 years is not a concern anymore with climbing rope going through the rings. A modification to the anchor cleaning procedure that I just showed you is that if you don't have a great stance at the top of the climb and you just want a little bit extra security, even though if you fall, you won't fall far, you'll still fall a little bit, to minimize that consequence is to have a personal tether that you can clip into the master point. Now there's a million kinds of personal tethers that you can get, but what I recommend for beginners who are starting out in single pitch, and then this is the only real application they need a personal tether for, is just get a quick draw. This is a robust 3-layered quick draw from Petzl, so I feel extremely secure with it, and fit it with 2 locking carabiners. Take one locking carabiner, lock it into the anchor system, and take the other locking carabiner and lock it into your belay harness. And from here, I can sit on this, weight it. It's a simple piece of equipment. It's one piece of equipment. I know exactly how, anybody knows how to use this, so they just look at it. It's super intuitive. And now I can go about the same procedure that I just showed you with this intact. Of course, once I get my belayer to give me a take on the figure 8 on a bite that I'll tie later, I can go ahead and remove this along with the anchor without any risk of falling. The last procedure for cleaning anchors that I'll share in this video is the traditional procedure of transferring onto a rappel and rappelling off the anchor system once it's cleaned. The benefits to this is that you do minimize wear and tear on the anchor system. It's important to understand the regulations of where you're climbing. They may not allow you or want you to lower on the rings, or it may be in a backcountry setting where it may not be good stewardship. So it's something to consider, but it's important to know both of these procedures because you'll inevitably have to use both. And if you're going to progress at all in climbing, you'll have to know how to transfer to a rappel anyways. So let's go ahead and go through this procedure as well. Okay, so once again, I've approached the top of the climb on top rope, 2 equal, opposite, and opposed locking carabiners through a master point. I need to have a PAS firstly to go ahead and get myself in this system. And it's important that step number 1 is you get a PAS system that's reliable, that you can clip yourself into the master point. And then from there, you've minimized your risk as you move through the rest of the procedure. So I'm going to use the Petzl Connect Adjust. I'll lock into the master point and I'll go ahead and tighten this down so that I can't really get too far without getting pulled on it. The next thing to do is to go ahead and get the rope through the rings. And one of your main concerns with this is dropping the rope while you're hooked into the master point, and then now you have no rope and you're stuck at the top, which in single pitch isn't a huge consequence, just maybe a shot at the ego, but just to minimize it, go ahead and pull about 10 or 15 feet of rope, do an overhand on a bite, and just clip that to your belt. Doesn't have to be a locker, and now I'm not going to drop it. From here, because I'm on my PAS and I've tested it, I can go ahead and untie my figure 8 that I used through my climbing harness. And now I have the end of the rope. This procedure is also useful if you can't fit a bite of rope through the rings and you have to go through with just the end of the rope. So go ahead and pass that through. Again, try to stay on the back of the anchor system so that when you go to clean your anchor system while the rappel is weighted, you don't have any issues. Go ahead and pull that through. Just to stay disciplined, it's good to go ahead and close the system, although not required if you can see the rope hit the ground on a toss, but as a beginner, it's probably good to just go ahead and build the habit. From here, I'll start pulling my rope through. Remember to untie your overhand on a bite. And then I can start pulling this rope through to the midpoint. Okay, here we are to the midpoint. From here, I can go ahead and set up my rappel. One of the main things I want you to start building a habit of, if you haven't already, is the use of a third hand in your rappel systems. There's so many accident reports that I read where if somebody would have just had a third hand installed, they wouldn't have leaned back on their ATC or reverso and they didn't rig it right and the rope passed through and they fell to their death, or they were cleaning a route on their way down and they just lost track of their hands on the rope and they fell to their death or fell to their injury. Hey, just use a third hand. It takes 2 seconds. This is a Sterling hollow block. I'll go ahead and tie an auto block hitch right here. I want to go ahead and test it and make sure it bites. And from here, I got total control of the rope. Now I can take the rope that I passed through the rings and go ahead and get it on the bottom. Now, a lot of people just toss the rope, and I guess that's fine, but hey, you know, a lot of times you don't even really have to toss a rope. You can just lower it down. So I can take the rope from the bottom of the third hand and just start to lower it down to where my partner is on the ground. And from there, I can just plop down this end. It's going to follow the same path that the rope's already at. Everybody already knows my rope's coming, and nobody's surprised by this big and they turn around and they think that I've fallen to my death or something like that. So we'll toss that down. You can still yell rope if you toss it, but by this time, probably everybody's aware of what you're doing. From here, the only thing left for me to do is go ahead and get my ATC, or in my case, a reverso, and attach it to my PAS. So I attach this with the clove hitch. I can pull that tight. And go ahead and place the rope through the slots in order to rappel. And lock that down. From here, I can go ahead and take up slack toward the anchors, pass my third hand up, and I can let out a little bit of slack on my personal anchor device, and now I can test the system. It's important not to skip this step. Why introduce risk as you test the system by unclipping your PAS. Go ahead and keep yourself clipped into this master point, so if you did hook up something wrong, you'll maybe fall back a little bit, but that PAS will catch you and be like, oh shoot, I need to fix this. Again, as highlighted at the beginning of the video, transferring weight from one system to another is one of the most dangerous things that you can do in climbing. So definitely back it up with your PAS while you do it. Now, once I've tested my new system, I feel totally confident in it. Again, another reason to have a third hand. I can go ahead and clean this system up. And now I'm ready to get down to the ground. Hey, I hope you found this video useful on cleaning anchors. Again, like I said, this is a really important procedure for you to practice on the ground first, so make sure you do that. If you have any questions, be sure to leave them in the comments. I'll try to address them as soon as possible. Make sure you got this procedure down pat before you head out to the crag. Hey, I'll see you out there.